Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into one of the shortest, but maybe one of the most intense letters in the entire New Testament, the Book of Jude.
Right from the get-go, you can feel the urgency. Jude basically says, look, I really wanted to write you this nice, happy letter about our common salvation, but I can't. Something big, something dangerous was happening, and he had to completely change course and send out a warning flare instead.
So who is this guy, Jude? Well, he's actually the half-brother of Jesus. Talk about a family connection, right? But what's fascinating is how he introduces himself. He doesn't say, hey, I'm Jesus' brother. No way. He calls himself a slave of Jesus Christ and the brother of James. He's not playing the family card. He's showing his humility and connecting himself to his more famous brother James, a huge leader in the church at the time.
All right, so let's get into it. What was this emergency? What was so bad that it made Jude pivot from a friendly chat to a full-blown alarm? Here's the kicker. The threat wasn't some outside force. It was an inside job.
And this is where the timeline gets really intense. You see, the Apostle Peter had just written a letter warning that false teachers will come. It was a future prophecy, but Jude is writing to say, guys, that future that Peter was talking about, it's here, it's now. The wolves are already in the flock. The problem wasn't coming, it had arrived.
So, who were these troublemakers? They weren't obvious enemies. Jude calls them certain men who had secretly slipped in. They were chameleons. They probably looked the part, sounded the part, maybe even traveled around preaching. But under the surface, their ideas were like a poison, spreading right through the heart of the community.
So what exactly were they teaching? Part of it was this early version of what we now call Gnosticism. The basic idea was that what you know, this special, secret knowledge, is way more important than how you live. It created this mindset of, I'm spiritually superior because I have this secret info, which, as you can imagine, is a fast track to arrogance and letting your morals just slide.
And that belief led right to this next big problem, antinomianism. It's a fancy word for a really dangerous idea. Basically, they took the beautiful concept of God's grace and twisted it into a get-out-of-jail-free card. Their logic, hey, if God's going to forgive me anyway, why not just do whatever I want? It turns grace into a license to sin, which is a complete perversion of the whole point.
Now, to show just how high the stakes are, Jude doesn't get into a complicated philosophical debate. Nope, he goes straight for the history books, their history books, the Old Testament. He pulls out 3 massive, unforgettable stories to prove one point. God takes this kind of rebellion very seriously.
And these examples aren't random. They show a pattern. First, you have the Israelites in the desert. God saved them from slavery in Egypt, but they were destroyed because of their unbelief. Then you have the rebellious angels, who had it all but threw it away. And finally, you get Sodom and Gomorrah, the ultimate example of moral corruption leading to fiery judgment. See the progression? Unbelief leads to rebellion, which leads to total moral chaos and judgment.
Okay, so Jude has attacked their ideas. Now he goes after their character. He basically creates a spiritual, most wanted poster, profiling these false teachers by comparing them to 3 of the biggest villains in the Old Testament.
First, he says, they're walking in the way of Cain. Remember him? Full of pride, rejected God's way, and ended up murdering his own brother. Then he says they've chased the error of Balaam. That's all about greed. Balaam was the prophet who would say whatever you paid him to say. And finally, they're repeating the rebellion of Korah, who couldn't handle Moses' God-given authority and tried to stage a coup. So you've got pride, greed, and rebellion. That's the trifecta.
And if you thought those comparisons were harsh, Jude is just getting warmed up. He then unleashes this incredible series of metaphors, all drawn from nature, to show just how hollow and destructive these teachers truly are.
Just listen to this imagery. He calls them dangerous reefs, hiding right under the surface, ready to shipwreck your faith. They're waterless clouds. They look promising, but they deliver absolutely no spiritual rain. They're fruitless trees in the fall, not just dead, but twice dead and pulled up by the roots. They're wild waves of the sea, just churning up their own shame. And finally, they're wandering stars, unreliable lights leading people off a cliff into total darkness. Wow, all promise, no substance, and incredibly dangerous.
Okay, so after that absolute verbal beatdown, you have to be wondering, so what are we supposed to do about it? Well, Jude doesn't leave them hanging. He lays out this really clear 5-step game plan for how to fight back. And here's the strategy. First, he says, you have to build yourselves up. Know your stuff, strengthen your own faith. Second, you have to pray. Stay connected to the source.
Third, you've got to maintain your place in God's love. Fourth, you have to wait patiently for Jesus' mercy. But look, it's not just about defense. The final step is to go on offense, in a way. You have to show mercy to the people who are being led astray. He says to snatch them from the fire. It's an active rescue mission.
But Jude adds this really important detail. He says to show this mercy with fear. Now, that doesn't mean being afraid of the people you're trying to help. It means having a healthy, reverent fear of God and of the sin that's destroying them. It's a really fine line to walk, right? You have to love the person enough to pull them out of the mud, but hate the mud enough that you don't get stained by it yourself. Compassion for the person, but zero tolerance for the poison.
And then, after all that fire and brimstone, all the warnings about judgment and deception, the letter ends with this beautiful, soaring note of hope. It's incredible. He finishes not by scaring them, but by reminding them where their real security comes from. It's not about how well they can fight. It's about the one who is able to keep them from falling.
So this short, ancient letter lands right in our laps with a question that feels like it could have been written this morning. In our world of endless information, misinformation, and online arguments, how does any group of people protect its core beliefs from being twisted and corrupted from the inside? How do you and I stand firm for what we believe in, while at the same time showing genuine love and mercy to people who are lost?